talk trade candidates? Can we catch a falling star from some of these contending teams that didn't contend to their level? We'll get to all of it today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets,
do that
part
again?
of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. You can get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. There's Doug Branson. You can find his work on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. There you can also find his sub-text information. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m., Sports Radio 92.7 FM. Let's talk trades today. This is very clickbaity, very juicy. You don't like the clickbaity thing?
No, because someone made a comment on your episode with Nada yesterday it wasn't that episode. It was the episode that we did on whether or not Miles Bridges had lost a step. And that was, the thumbnail. I put the thumbnail out there as he lost a step. And someone called that clickbait. But my definition of clickbait is when you have a title or a thumbnail that draws you into something, baits you, but then doesn't deliver. And that's where I would argue where that thumbnail and this conversation that we are about to have is not clickbait, because we are going to deliver on that conversation.
Okay.
We always deliver.
That's right. So if that's the case, then I take it back. But if I was viewing this as just big, juicy bait for a catfish to come in and swallow whole, and then we got you hooked up and now we're bringing you in, the graphic is going to be real for this one. Think about, I just picture you going to Photoshop, Doug, and then you roll with Kevin Durant. You have Devin Booker up there. You got D'Angelo Russell. You got whoever.
Devin
and
Snooker,
boom,
Devin Snooker, I don't think so. By the way, the Suns going out in 4 is just outstanding for my Devin Snooker hate. Just outstanding.
I know it's not good for you. It's also outstanding for people that might hate Kevin Durant. Before we get to the possibility of catching a falling star from some of these contending, not so contending teams, I know you had a trade proposal you came across that was interesting, or at least some trade candidates for the Hornets you came across that are interesting.
Yeah, well, so Greg Swartz of Bleacher Report wrote an article. Talk about, now this, again, I don't think this is clickbait because I think he delivers on the promise, but he had a very we need to find another term, like a click delicious, click munchies. This is delivering here. He gave one player for each team that could hit the trade block. And for the Charlotte Hornets, I don't know. Have you looked at the rundown already? Do you know the player?
I do know one of the players.
I can't make you guess. So what I'll ask you instead, I won't make you guess because I can't make you guess. What I would ask instead is, you know who the player is. Did the player name surprise you? Who would you have said before you saw this name?
Well, we're speaking. This is weird now because now we just don't let the people in on the joke. We're not delivering here, Doug. I will. This is stalling. This is teasing. We are tantalizing people. This makes sense to me because of the money.
Okay, but who would you have said before you saw this name? Would you have said this name?
I probably would have gone Grant Williams.
Okay, good. It is not Grant Williams. It is, in fact, Davis Bertans is the Hornets' pick for Greg Swartz. And Greg writes, despite ongoing injury concerns, the Hornets have shown no signs of shopping Lamelo Ball, with the core of him, Brandon Miller, and Mark Williams all appearing safe. Bertans is a player to keep an eye on, though, due to his unique contract. The 31-year-old is owed $16 million next season in the final year of his deal. But an amendment agreed between the Latvian and the Oklahoma City Thunder in November 2023 removed a game's played guarantee in his contract while adding more guaranteed money to his base salary. This means the Hornets, or any team that trades for Bertans, can choose to keep him at $16 million I don't think it was good. Or release the veteran forward and owe just $5.2 million instead. Due to the uniqueness of his contract, Bertans may be a player included in a deal this summer. So, Walker, do you think that of all the names on the Hornets roster, that, and this is not what Greg is saying necessarily, but do you think that Davis is the most tradable contract on this roster?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, when you're trying to match salaries, Bertans is the guy that I was thinking of immediately. So, yes, that makes sense. If you're just talking about from a player standpoint who another team might value more, especially after the second half of the season or the last third of the season he had, that's the only reason I would have gone with Grant Williams. Plus, it's a very affordable contract with Grant, too. But with Bertans, this makes all the sense in the world. Yeah, I think that probably is correct, but it's not necessarily for a team looking to play Bertans. It might be looking for just some salary filler and then whatever, right? Like, this is all money based, not necessarily even just trying to find, okay, we love the shooter. It's a enhancer for sure, but this is not why we're going after him, because we believe Bertans is worth $16 million. It's just to make the money right and because of the uniqueness of the contract you speak of.
No, yes, it's totally cap mathematics. It's simple cap mathematics. It's simple enough for even Steve Clifford, who doesn't want anything to do with like the cap in his new role down the hall where he's going to be some member of the front office. He said, I don't want to really figure this cap stuff out. I was told there would be no math. But this is easy to understand, right? The detail that I left out is that $16 million number that Davis is owed is not guaranteed until January of next year, meaning that a team this offseason could trade for Davis Bertans, use that $16 million number as the number to match, and then they get to get rid of $10 million of that money. It's perfect. It really is so unique and so perfect for being traded. And then Davis, if he does get released, could go to another team. And that's good for Davis because I think he still can contribute. I don't think in that scenario where the Hornets would trade him that he could go back to the Hornets. I think there's a rule against that, trading a player and then that player getting waived and then going back to the team. Because I think some teams were fooling around with that in the NBA, put the band hammer on that move. But Davis could go and contribute because he showed for the Hornets that if he's a guy that's coming off the bench to knock down a couple of threes, super good. Because he can play good team defense, not necessarily great one-on-one team defender. But if he's asked to do anything more than that, which is what you would want some guy to do if he were $60 million. By the way, that $60 million number, Walker, if the Hornets, and they won't, but if they were to take that number on next season, he would be the second highest paid player on the roster to only Lamelo Ball, who just had his number jump to 35.25. But that's funny. But anyway, another team could love him at way less money.
Yeah, and that's without considering Miles Bridges coming back. If Miles comes back, you would have to imagine he'd be higher paid than Bertans. But him being the third highest paid player would be funny as well. You had something else on the payroll you were looking at?
Well, just I'm looking at this list to try to find players. So the number for Davis makes him perfect. But are there players that would be more enticing to actually trade for and keep? What do you think about that?
Yes, I have a list.
Okay,
I just came up with a list just now.
Is it ranked?
Payroll.
Are we ranking? Is this ranked radio?
I'm ranking. Well, look, it's just natural, baby. Like, this is what I do.
Okay, well, so how many are on the list?
I have 3.
Okay, top 3.
Right
so
now.
This is top 3.
One is cheating.
Okay.
But I have 3.
Top 3 most tradable assets. Yep. Well, okay, from a playing perspective, most tradable aspects on the Charlotte Hornets.
Okay, yeah, all right. Nick Richards, number 1.
Wow. What, you just went number 1?
Nick Richards, number 1.
Have you done Rank Radio before? I thought we were going 3, 2, 1. What are we doing here?
I'm going the opposite way. I just wanted to tell you the top. I wanted to tell you the top answer. Look, I'm trying to deliver. I'm trying to not do the clickbait thing. I want to deliver without having to tease the people. We've teased the people way too much. I wanted to let you know who number 1 was, and number 1 is Nick Richards. The reason being, I'm a little surprised that he's still on the roster. The only reason I guess I'm not completely surprised that he's on the roster is because it's not like you could go back to Mark Williams at the deadline. They had 0 centers if you traded him, and it was only Grant Williams that you could roll with. So you're talking about no size whatsoever unless you're talking about Bolden or you're bringing Mensa back, and they didn't want to do that. So that's the reason you might not trade him. But, man, it feels like everybody loves him as this backup center, making $5 million a year, Doug. I think he's the most tradable. Second most tradable, I think Micic. Micic at $7 million. We saw how good he was. A little up and down, but at $7 million, totally fine. Deserves to be in the league. Can really help you in spot starts, but also as a 6th man off of the bench, 7th man, or just some guard depth, right? Like, probably not for a contender, 6th, 7th man. But some helpful guard depth. I think Micic is a guy that teams would feel comfortable with going after because of the contract and because he's a player they can trust. And third is cheating a little bit, but what about a sign and trade with Miles Bridges? So if you're looking for not quite superstar or consistent all-star status, but a really high impact player, then Miles Bridges would be that guy. And if another team doesn't want to take a chance that another franchise would grab him up in free agency, well, then they would just give something up to the Hornets. You guys know how sign and trades work. I know you don't see it a lot, but I remember a couple of years ago, anytime we tried to make a sign and trade work, people would say, oh, well, it just never happens. You never see it. And then there were like 5 sign and trades that offseason. Like, it can happen. So a Miles Bridges sign and trade would be the third on my list.
Oh, the Hornets, they did a sign and trade for Kemba Walker, and it resulted in Terry Rozier. And people, weren't in love with that at the time, but he turned out to be a really good player. So if the front office if this version of the front office can identify another asset, then you don't give him away for nothing. At least if you were going to let him walk, if a team was going to poison pill it by offering him a huge boatload of money, and that would maximize, Miles's incentive right now is to make up some lost time and some lost money, and so that would be good for him as well. So I think there's one name that you left off the list that I would put on my list, and that would be Trey Mann. Now, I don't think the Hornets should trade Trey Mann. I think they should hold on to that young, affordable asset, pick up the option, move forward, and see what you got there in Trey Mann, because you need backup point guard play, as evidenced by the past couple of seasons, or you at least need that insurance. So I'm not advocating for it, but I'm saying young, affordable, can extend them on down the line. I mean, Trey Mann, I think, would be an interesting. And here's the thing. I think the Hornets will get calls on that. And if they make calls on trades for some of those first-round picks, I bet a lot of those teams are going to go, hey, what about Trey?
He was 4th on my list.
Okay.
Number 4. All right, let's move on. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Anyway, maybe not these trade candidates, but is there any way that you would be able to trade assets? We know they have them. They loaded up on them at the deadline. Would you use some of those assets to go after one of these falling stars from the teams that didn't contend to their liking? That's coming up next. Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. What you can do is you can, experience a lot of deals. You have last-minute deals for those procrastinators out there. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, even more than that. You have flash and zone deals. Flash deals, you can save even more money with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And zone deals means you can save more money when you choose a section and let Gametime choose your seat. So if you don't care about the individual seat, you just know what zone you want to sit in, which is often what times I'm doing when I'm going to a game live, then zone deals is the deal for you. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Doug, I was listening to the Zach Lowe pod after Phoenix lost and after we started to see some of these teams go down. They were discussing Kevin Durant teams already, a tradition unlike any other. Listening to Zach Lowe in the offseason discuss what team should go after KD and if the team KD currently plays for should be willing to trade Kevin Durant. Well, we do this annually at this point. He was listing off the teams that should be interested in a Kevin Durant trade, and it's tough. Boston, kind of, but not really. You're talking about Atlanta. That was the best one that he could come up with. That was his favorite option. And when he was going down the list, I was like, wait, I was thinking if I would hear Charlotte. Like, I was trying to anticipate if the Hornets made any sense at all. And it could if you bought into LaMelo being healthy. And of course you would keep LaMelo and Brandon in this deal. I feel like we're at a point where I'm not sure what the value would be for Kevin Durant. To me, it's not just, oh, okay, give him everything you possibly can anymore. Like I don't think like maybe he goes still for 4 first rounders. Maybe I'm being an idiot because it's Kevin Durant, but it doesn't seem like you would still be doing the same thing that Phoenix did to get Kevin Durant, right? So I don't know. Does Charlotte make sense for him or any of these other falling stars that you might see from the losses that they experienced in the first round of the playoffs?
Walker, I'm old enough to remember a time when the Charlotte Hornets used to get involved in major trade deals for
Russell
star
Westbrook
players.
says hi. Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm old enough to remember when they were in those conversations, yes. But I'm even older than that, and I'm old enough to remember when they were in Charlotte the first time, when they were involved, when they actually pulled the trigger and got a big deal done for major superstars. Now, one would be quick to note that the Hornets did also have some star assets that they could also move in those deals, and I understand that. Sometimes you gotta give to get. So I totally get that. But I've also been living in an era for a long time now where they have either been rumored, and then not gotten to the final, step to make the deal, or they just haven't been involved in these deals at all. And so I guess I'm just trained at this point to expect nothing. To happen. And I don't know if these new owners, now maybe they're just sort of talking like, hey, we're gonna be simple, and we're gonna be we're gonna sustainable success, and we're gonna really be patient with this whole thing. Maybe that's just all talk, and they're just all kind of, they don't want to reveal any cards, keep all those close to the chest, and they want to make sure that they're in the strongest negotiating place as possible for when they do make something happen. But I'm not going to sit here on this show and give you any kind of indication that anything like that is going to happen, because it would be irresponsible, because it would be really, I've got no evidence. I can't tell you that it's going to happen. I would love for it to happen. I would love for them to make a big splash, whether it's Kevin Durant, DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, all of these pieces that are going to be available from teams. I mean, Brandon Ingram, New Orleans, they've got to reset. Chicago, good God. Chicago has been a threat they are the bleep tease of the NBA when it comes to threatening to blow it up. And then when they can't get 17 draft picks for Zach LaVine, they all of a sudden say, no, we're going to go and lose a play-in game again. Like, get out of here, Chicago. Anyway, what was I saying?
That you were going to be responsible and you weren't going to be irresponsible.
Yeah, I'm going to be responsible in saying that I can't sit here on this show and tell you that the Hornets are going to make a big splash until they do. It's going to surprise us. When they do it, and they will do it at some point in the next 20, 30, 40 years, when they do it, it's going to be a shock, and we'll all say, oh my God, I never saw it coming, because how do you see it coming at this point?
But you've been warning people about the zig while everybody is zagging, or we're thinking about the zag. Would this not be a zig, Doug, especially because we haven't seen them zig before?
It totally would. I am prepared for that in a sense, but again, I've been trained. I'm just telling you, Walker, I've been trained over the last few years out of this idea that the Hornets are actually going to go in there and compete. And here's the thing, the moment that this new ownership group shows that they're willing to do that, the fan base will love it. If they make a splash of any kind, this fan base is so starving, they will love it. They will love it. There's not going to be any criticism. And other organizations, other fan bases have taken for granted that their teams are willing to go out there and do what it takes, use every tool in the tool belt to go and make a winning team. And so then when they do go and make moves, those fan bases are like, well, I don't think that was the right move. They should have done this instead. This fan base will not do that. They will say, oh my God, you did something. Let's go win some games.
So there's a couple things with the trading with these contenders, right? So one, if we're really talking about Kevin Durant, which, again, I don't think is going to happen either. I'd be foolish to think that was going to happen.
But can you imagine if it did?
Are we bringing that back?
I try every now and then.
Yeah, you do. It didn't fizzle out. We just never – I guess it kind of did, but not by choice.
Well, but I'll tell you why, and it has to do exactly with this conversation that we're having. And I'm sorry, Walker, I don't know why I'm so close to the camera right now. I'm really feeling it. I get a day off, and I come back, and I'm full of
Get closer.
I'm full of vinegar. Here's the thing. We can't imagine it because our imaginations have not been tickled. They have not been tickled in a very long time. And these new owners, I'll say, have not done a good job of tickling that imagination. They came in and said, we're, steady as she goes, sustainable success, all the things that we heard from Mitch Kupchak And to a larger extent, the Michael Jordan umbrella seems to be, they seem to be saying continuing. But I'll say this, what's the best thing that you should do if you want to run for president? It's say you don't want to run for president. So I'm just saying, maybe we're getting rope-a-doped here. Maybe there's some zag in motion right now that they just want to say all of this stuff, and then all of a sudden, I don't think it's going to be Phoenix though, because it seems like Ishbia, he really pushed all of his chips to the table and went all in, and I don't think a guy like that is going to be so quick to want to blow that up. I think he's going to do everything that he can to see that out. I mean, one season.
Let's go down the list of these teams on the other side of the break, because I have some thoughts on Phoenix, on LA, both LA teams, New Orleans. Let's do that and go down the list of what makes sense coming in return. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
It's been a fun show.
You had a moment. You had a moment there for sure. What are the tradable candidates that could possibly land some interesting pieces on, I don't know, the deadline before we even start the season? We'll get to that in just a moment here, Locked On Hornets. Before we do that, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. And I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about that, Walker. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends or for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get to. Unique stickers you can trade with a friend, complete albums for big prizes. You have cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go, it feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. More Locked On Hornets ahead. So, Doug, if they did decide to do the whole zig thing, you'd be prepared for it, but your imagination has not been tickled. Maybe they start just tickling it a little bit. It's not like it's going to happen, okay? But the way to get to a possible Kevin Durant acquisition, let's just play this for fun, shall we? The way to do it, you'd have to get up to $50 million. It's a lot of salary to try to reach. The best way to do it would be the sign and trade with Miles Bridges, who, by the way, Phoenix was reportedly interested in at last year's NBA trade deadline.
They were sniffing.
So if they were tickling, for sure. Ooh. They were definitely tickling. So if you are tickling with Miles Bridges, you can make up half of that with, I don't know, probably a high end at 25, but 25 is certainly reachable for Miles Bridges. So now you get to half of that. Now you still have $25 more million to go. You've already done a lot of the work at making it worth it for a win now scenario, because if you're trading Kevin Durant, that means you're trying to please Devin Booker to the point where he wants to stay there, right? So you've taken care of a lot of that chunk of, one, giving them help now, two, reaching salaries. Now it gets hard. Like Grant Williams is probably in the deal. That means $12 million. So now you're at what, 37? You have $13 more million to go. And then at that point, you're probably rolling with Micic, and it would be interesting to see how much they like Cody Martin. And you're talking about what? How many picks, right? You're talking this year's first, so you wouldn't have a pick at the top of this year's draft. You would talk about second. Is it 3/3? So let's go 3 third-round picks, or excuse me, 3 first-round picks.
Okay.
Miles Bridges.
Okay.
Micic, Grant Williams, Cody Martin for Kevin Durant. Like something, whatever with that. But Miles and Grant, I would think, would have to be the two included players here. Is that something you would do for KD?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know that they would do that. Here's the problem. Yeah. Here's the problem with doing anything for KD, any amount of picks, any amount of players, is that if you're going to hire a first-time head coach, and certainly handing him a piece like Kevin Durant sounds tantalizing, but, he has a penchant for not agreeing with what, coaches have plans for. And so I think that would be difficult for a first-time head coach. I mean, especially if it's going to be Redick. I mean, ask Steve Nash how that worked out, right? I mean, so I think that would be difficult if you're just sort of long-term planning. And how much long-term planning can you do when you have Kevin Durant, who constantly wants to move around and probably is not going to be, I don't know, he's played in Phoenix, but super thrilled with the idea of playing in Charlotte. I think that would be difficult. I think, to me, what would make more sense for the Hornets is to try to get involved as a third team in one of these deals and pick up even more assets, or to pick around the edges, once everybody, gets done firing their first shots in this, because when there's not a huge free agency pool, I think it puts more pressure on franchises to do some deals, move some pieces around to try to make things better for their organization. So I think you are going to see a lot of trades. The Hornets could be beneficiaries of that, or they can wait and maybe look at upgrading a particular position, like the center position, add some more physicality, as you said, make Nick Richards a piece that you can move, and add some more physicality in the form of Mitchell Robinson from New York. I mean, he's lost a starting job now, so maybe, but he's being paid starter money. I mean, that is sort of classic guy who ends up on the block at some point. There are a lot of names out there that I think they could look at, both from a three-point shooting perspective and a physicality perspective. So I think those are all options for the Hornets.
Yeah, and by the way, timing's not right for Kevin Durant. We're having fun with that conversation if you wanted to get in on the KD stuff. But the reason I even ask it for, would you be interested in giving up that package for Kevin Durant? Yes, I guess that would be true. But you're also right. Like, think about it if you were in Phoenix's situation. You get rid of all these assets, and Phoenix was ready to go. They already had a bona fide All-NBA player in Devin Booker, even though you call him Devin Snooker. But it made much more sense for even Phoenix to do that than what it would be for the Hornets. So, like, for the big game hunting type stuff, that doesn't seem like it's the right time. Excuse me. Fine. That doesn't seem like it would be the right time for the Hornets to go big game hunting for any of these stars, really. Like, I guess Anthony Davis, but Anthony Davis would take everything in the moon, and I don't even know if they'd still, the Lakers would say yes to whatever we had to offer outside of Brandon Miller and Lamelo, and I'm not trying to give those guys up.
But
and
you
even
can't.
LaMelo,
I don't even
right?
know if you can't, because, I mean, that would be, I think that's the name that we left out of the Kevin Durant conversation, is Lamelo and his $35 million. That would get you a long way to that deal. The problem is with including LaMelo or Mark Williams, for that matter, in any kinds of discussions like this, are that their injury concerns are such that it would make even Matt Ishbia, who is just hungry, he is salivating to put a winning franchise in Phoenix. I think it would make them all like, I don't know about that. You got to have LaMelo Ball play a season where he plays 65 games and plays at an all-star level before you can even begin to have that discussion.
Well, yeah, and especially if you're talking about dealing LaMelo, like even with the star stuff, LaMelo is probably one of the least likely players to be traded in the NBA, because it just makes way more sense for the Hornets to keep somebody that they just paid $200 million to, that also doesn't have enough value because of his injury history right now, that another team would be willing to pay 100 cents on the dollar. And so this is a perfect storm of LaMelo's not going anywhere unless he just throws a complete fit and wants out, and then the Hornets would feel, okay, we don't want to deal with this headache. We'll just take 70 cents on the dollar. And that hasn't happened. So I feel like LaMelo is probably one of the least likely players in the entire NBA to be traded at this point. That's why I don't even include him in these trade discussions.
Another name that could be interesting in that physical centerpiece is a guy that has tortured the Hornets over the past few seasons, and that's Isaiah Stewart, Beef Stew. And he plays for Detroit, and Detroit is definitely wanting to shuffle the decks a little bit. And what do they do with Cade Cunningham? Is that their number one option? Do they need more around him? And so Miles Bridges has been a name in free agency that they've looked at. But again, if Miles wants to maximize dollar amount, if the Hornets want to get some pieces in return, then I think that could be a good marriage there for a sign and trade that brings back Beef Stew. I mean, if you're talking about a realistic player that I would love to see in a Hornets uniform, It's that guy, man. I love watching that guy play. I think it would be fantastic in Charlotte. And we got there's a sicko sound off thing in the rundown here, and I was going to go through some comments. I don't think we're going to have time to go through as many as I wanted to, but there was one based off of the last episode that has to do with what I was just talking about, which is a commenter that I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have it pulled up, but I'm paraphrasing here, and they said, based on the conversation that you and Nada had in the last episode, are we giving up on Mark Williams? How can we be giving up on Mark Williams and be talking about drafting a center, and now I'm sitting here talking about adding a center in Mitchell Robinson who's making starter money or beef stew? How are we giving up on Mark Williams this early, Walker?
Well, and I don't think we are giving up at all. I think what we're doing is we're looking at the top of the draft, and we're seeing there are two players that could be considered the best players in what is a weak draft. Do you want to stay away from the center position because you already have Mark Williams on the roster, even with his injury history? And to me, I just don't think that you're in a comfortable enough center situation to negate the idea of selecting one in the top 5. So that doesn't mean giving up on Mark Williams. It just means if Sarr is the best guy available and you have the number 1 overall pick, then you take Sarr. Klingon is much more debatable. And I said yesterday, I wouldn't take Klingon. I would take Stephon Castle if he's there. All of this is, of course, contingent on if whatever player is available. But I wouldn't take Klingon. I'd probably find another reason to take somebody else. But if you have Sarr, and he's the number 1 guy and people really feel like he is that top talented player, then yeah, you're not going to not take Sarr because you have Mark Williams on the roster. And this is coming from someone who really likes Mark Williams when he's on the floor.
Another commenter, another sicko said, Stingin or Klingon.
That one was good, and I saw that one.
Which is a fun play on Stangen or Klingon, which we're bringing back, by the way. So I think what has happened here, and we've talked a little bit about this episode, is that we haven't had our imaginations tickled. I've talked about in previous episodes how this fan base has some trauma that they're going to have to deal with from the fact that we haven't been to the playoffs, the actual playoffs, in almost a decade. They have not won a playoff series in more than 2 decades. There's a lot that we're dealing with. And one of the parts of that trauma is that you and I get on here and we talk a lot about hope, and we talk a lot about prospects, and we talk a lot about ceilings. And I think what happens is people mistake what a player could become with what they are. And that's Mark Williams. And that's Lamelo to an extent too, is that you can't mistake what we were excited about when we see him play and we see him put up, double doubles with 20 rebounds, and you go, ooh, yes, there's tantalizing aspects of that. But he has not become that player yet. And on top of that, you're talking about back injury, center with Lamelo. You're talking about multiple ankle injuries that have already affected his ability to shoot the way he wanted to shoot coming into the league. And so all of those things are super dangerous, tenuous for their prospective careers, and you can't mistake what we think they could become with what they are. And if you're an organization trying to build a roster, you have to at some point sit yourself down and go, hey, nothing's guaranteed. We have to take these players on what they are and make sure that we have backup plans, and then responsible organizations have backup plans to the backup plans. So you got to figure that out too. But that's why I'm open to everything at this point. The Hornets, they didn't win 30 games last season. You have to explore every single position in terms of finding the next player. And look, if they bring in Klingon and they go out and get Mitchell Robinson, then if you're Mark Williams, you better be healthy and you better be ready to compete. It's not giving up on Mark Williams. It's challenging him to go win his position.
And then at that point, you could still, I think, find some trade value for Mark, I think. But I don't know what would happen there. So we'll see what they decide to do at center, but that'll be a continuing conversation as the offseason goes on. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast. That includes YouTube. Make sure you go check out Doug's Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. And make sure you listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.